were stars or role players only in the context of their league. They've all come to Casino Windsor for a unique gathering. But despite the venue for this event, these people have already made perhaps their biggest gambles, joining a fledgling hockey circuit that was formed to take on the National Hockey League. This is the story of the people who made a dream into reality. The story of the World Hockey Association, a 7-year wonder that still has a significant impact on the game of hockey as we know it today. Hi there, I'm Corey McCrindle. Welcome to a look back at the World Hockey Association. The WHA was founded in early 1971 by Gary Davidson, Dennis Murphy, and others who shared their vision. Murphy had previously helped form a league to rival the National Basketball Association. The WHA would take on the National Hockey League. Back then, the NHL featured 14 teams, and with names like Bobby Orr and the Esposito brothers, had star power. The NHL also had a virtual lock on its players. The team had the option to renew a player's contract without their permission. The WHA challenged the so-called reserve clause and won. The new league became rebels without a clause and offered the players an exciting new option. They could sign on with the new league or force their teams into upping their salaries. What the WHA needed badly was a drawing card. The fledgling league scored a huge coup when the NHL's top left winger, Chicago Blackhawk Bobby Hull, signed on with Winnipeg.
He was the credibility. He was the star. He was the guy. And when he came over, 67 other NHL hockey players joined us. And when that all happened, you know, it opened up the floodgates. And so we started off with credibility. We had great hockey players.
A great, albeit reluctant one. Here's Hull's version of how he became a Winnipeg Jet.
I said, tell them I want $1 million, and if they give me $1 million up front, just jokingly, because no athlete had ever been paid $1 million, and I'm talking about in any sport at that time, and I didn't think anybody, needless to say, this cowboy is worth $1 million. I said, tell them if they give me $1 million bonus, then they've got themselves a hockey player. And I just chuckled at it, thinking that that would be enough to get rid of them.
Wild Bill Hunter owned the Alberta Oilers. He helped make sure the WHA had the last laugh, but he had to put the squeeze on the rest of the fledgling franchises.
He was signed because I filibustered till 11 o'clock at night and made every owner come up with money. I said, we're pulling out. We'll collapse the league. You
can guess the rest. Hull got his $1 million, and the Winnipeg Jets got themselves a superstar. From that crucial signing forward, the league began to accumulate more big-name players and several who had yet to prove themselves.
We actually were just hockey players. We didn't know about the stranglehold the NHL had on the players as much as we do now. So when I went to, I was negotiating with the Cleveland Crusaders and Nick Maletti, and what really made me jump to the WHA was the first thing that Nick Maletti said when he met me. He says, how's your family and your 2 boys? And at that time, that was the first time anybody in hockey had even mentioned my family. It was all money to them, and they treated you more like cattle than anything else.
I think in 1971, someone came to Cleveland while I was playing for Cleveland Barons, and we met in a dark alley somewhere, and he told me about the league starting. And I said, oh, maybe, you know, it's a good time to do it. I was about 29 years old. And I guess about 2 or 3 months later it happened, and someone called me, and I went to Winnipeg, flew to Winnipeg, and I signed the contract right away. I said, why not?
I was in the same boat as a lot of minor leaguers. I was in the American League, and the money wasn't that good, and then this new league comes along, and they're offering you, at that time, $50,000 or $60,000 to play something that you loved. I couldn't get there quick enough.
Pat Stapleton and I were the only 2 Blackhawk players that were free agents, so to speak, and he jumped to the Cougars. Pat was the name of the coach. He approached me and said, I can get you a good signing bonus. I can get you a 5-year, no-cut, no-trade contract. And being 35 years old at the time was all the incentive I needed.
As happy as many of the players were to have this new opportunity, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Here's a slice of WHA history that shows the league may have started on the wrong skate.
The league was trying to do something innovative and introduced a blue puck. And at the same time, a Zamboni had come out on the ice for warm-ups. Unfortunately, the guy that was driving the Zamboni had no experience whatsoever. Came out on the ice to a packed house in Philadelphia, and the Zamboni blades went right through the ice and cut the pipes. The game had to be canceled. Derek Sanderson was the spokesperson, came out to tell the people the game was canceled because of the ice conditions. They had given out blue pucks to all of the fans. Before you knew it, they were throwing pucks at Derek Sanderson at center ice.
When we come back, a look at some hometown heroes and how the Hows made hockey a family affair.
Hi, I'm Mark Howe, formerly of the WHA.
Hi, I'm Gordy Howe.
And I'm Colleen Howe.
And I'm Marty Howe.
And you can stay listening in and learn more about the WHA and its wonderful days.
The WHA began play in the 1972-73 season and featured 12 teams. 4 of them were based in Canada. The NHL only had 3 Canadian teams at that time. For some players, this meant a chance to play in or near their hometown. The Ottawa Nationals had some players from Northern Ontario and area. Most of the Quebec Nordiques roster hailed from that province. The Winnipeg Jets appealed to the Manitoba-born player, and the Alberta Oilers had some players who had previously played for the Edmonton Oil King Juniors.
I'd had 2 pretty good years in Buffalo, where I was in the top 10 in scoring for defensemen in the league, and I'd had 2 successful years. But I'd played junior hockey in Edmonton. I knew that the person that bought the team, who I had known his family, and they guaranteed my contract for 5 years. So it's kind of difficult to turn your back on that.
Goaltender Joe Daly was struggling to make it in the NHL. For him, the Winnipeg Jets became a ticket to hometown stardom.
Joe played his junior hockey in Winnipeg, and he was raised in Winnipeg, so what an opportunity to go back to your hometown, play before your father and mother and in-laws and all your buddies, coming to watch you play. And, I think it'd give Joe another 10 years of hockey. So he really, experienced a great opportunity there, and Joe really played well for Winnipeg Jets.
Joe was never more than a slightly above average goalie, and yet he still remains successful in Winnipeg. He's well loved in Winnipeg. He was with Winnipeg during those great years, and was able to put himself in a position where he won 3 AFCO Cups, and not many people can say that.
Another major coup for the WHA came in its 2nd season. Some deft maneuvering helped lure former Detroit Red Wings superstar Gordie Howe out of retirement. The Houston Aeros had already signed junior prospects Mark and Marty Howe from the Toronto Marlboros. To do that, they took advantage of a loophole pointed out to them by the boy's mother, Colleen. Why couldn't the WHA draft players that weren't yet 20 years old? The NHL had rules against underage drafting, but the WHA, Colleen Howe discovered, did not.
I believe that if a child has a real talent, or a young person has a talent to do something, let's say they play violin, so who's going to tell them at what age they can do what? I feel that that should be something that is decided by the young person and their family, and in this case, it turned out that both Marty and Mark were eligible. And instead of just staying with the juniors, then they were able to step up and have their first years into pro.
The 2 boys were decent players on their own, but also provided the Aeros with exactly the right bait to lure the 45-year-old Gordie to sign.
They came to Detroit to talk about Marty and I contract, and my mom and Dad sat down, and Dad just jokingly said, "Well, what do you think if I'd play?" And I laughed because everything about Marty and Mark Howe went out the door, and it was all Gordie. So, but it was great. I mean, everybody's eyes lit up when Dad decided he wanted to come back and play.
You'd think the 2 younger Howes would be nervous about lining up with their famous father, but it turns out it was the elder Howe who had a case of the jitters.
The night before we were supposed to go play our first game against Cleveland, I went into spasms. It put me in the hospital and put weights on me, and it shot me up a little bit, and I had a good night's sleep. Next morning they released me, and Colleen, like she always says, taking care of me, said, go to bed and get rest for the game. I said, no way, I'm on my feet, I'm staying there. So it was, no doubt in my mind, it's the greatest thing ever happened to me.
As great as it was, there were still a few adjustments to be made by this father-son's set.
A lot of people always ask us why we call Gordy Gordy, because he used to always be Dad, of course, like most families, and until we became pro together. And if you're going down the ice and yelling, hey, Dad, for a pass or something like that, he would just ignore you like, what is this kid trying to do, embarrass me out here? So from then on, we started calling him Gordy. It was the only way we could get a response, so ever since then, it's been Gordy.
The first year I was playing with Dad, what would happen, I was a little bit quicker at the time because he was a little older, but if we could make a play, he tried to dump the puck in my corner. It wasn't very often. Most of the times I was able to beat the defender to it. And I'd get in there and I'd take a hit. Well, then about a second after the original hit, I would just get crushed. And I'd look up, well, it was Dad just getting into the play. And I took it for about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and I finally got to the bench one day and sucking some air. I said, Dad, just let the guy hit me. They're not hurting me. I said, but you're killing me.
In his first WHA season, Gordie Howe scored 100 points and was named the league's most valuable player. Mark Howe was named the top rookie. Marty developed a grinding style and chipped in with a few points. And hockey as a family unit in Houston was a lot of fun.
For the first time in many years, I mean, I saw Gordie just so happy. I saw Mark and Marty happy.
When we return, meet some of the players who escaped hockey obscurity to thrive in the new league, and find out how a lack of money threatened to derail some teams.
Hi, I'm Robbie Fedoruk, and we'll be back to learn more about the WHA in just a moment.
You know, the lighting boutique is big.
The WHA also helped develop its own stars, players that toiled either in the minors or in relative obscurity on the fringes of NHL rosters. Tom Webster is now the coach of the Ontario Hockey League Windsor Spitfires. He spent time with 3 NHL teams before jumping to the WHA's New England Whalers. Webster notched 50-plus goals and more than 100 points in his first WHA season. He also helped his team win the first ever Avco trophy.
They spent some good money in bringing these kind of players in together. We gelled at the right time. We had a mixed group of talent and a mixed group of personalities that just seemed to click and took advantage, I think, of a very good situation for ourselves in winning the first Avco Cup.
Ron Magic Ward was another player who became a WHA star once given the opportunity to perform. In his first season with the league, Ward scored 118 points. Not bad for a guy who describes himself as being a weak skater.
Players like myself didn't have that much of a chance in the NHL, and some from the Eastern League, the American League out there. We had nothing to lose. It was a chance in a lifetime to be big league. We were traveling airplanes. We're getting, good money. We doubled our salaries, most of us, some tripled. It was exciting, and it was the adventure, again, of new faces, a new league, new people, new cities, and what was going to happen? What was going to happen?
For Ward, what happened was more new faces in more new cities. He managed to play for 7 different teams in his WHA career, which is quite a feat considering the league lasted just 7 seasons. It wasn't skating that hindered Robbie Fedoruk's chances in the NHL. After all, he was a former figure skater. But Fedoruk lacked what many considered NHL size, standing just 5'8".
And the only reason I was able to play probably is because of my figure skating, because I was so small. I had good balance and good edges because of the figure skating, and good leverage. And when the other guys were concerned about the puck, I was already shooting, because when they were worried about their edges, I was already stick handling, so I was always a step ahead.
Fedoruk parlayed a stellar WHA career into another 6 seasons in the NHL, and is now the coach of the New Jersey Devils. But for all the success stories that the WHA fostered, there were also several disappointments and plenty of turmoil. Teams would change cities, sometimes folding in mid-season. Several clubs had financial troubles. It got so bad that some members of the Chicago Cougars decided to take matters into their own hands. 4 players, including Pat Stapleton and Ralph Backstrom, made a bold move. They bought the team.
Well, the Chicago Cougars were skating on thin ice, so to speak, and we were approached by Dennis Murphy, the founder of the World Hockey Association. He said, why don't you guys all chip in and keep the team in Chicago for the remainder of the year? If you would like to change your mind at the end of the year, the league will step in and buy the team from you guys. So we did that. We raised some money. We kept the team floating for the remainder of the season. And we ended up losing some money.
The money problems weren't limited to Chicago.
The first year in San Diego, our owner quit, and we ended up we were ran by the league for the rest of the year. And for the guys to stick together and play out the year, and we did well in the playoffs that year, I think it was a tribute to all the players.
We went through times when we weren't getting paid. We went through times where 3 or 4 times we could have folded the leagues. The players could have walked out. And I will say this about the players in the WHA, even though I fought most of them and they fought me, the better players on each team stood up for the littler guys. We could have walked away, and us, the better players on the teams, could have got jobs in the NHL, but we stuck through it, and we said, look, we got to protect these little guys, because if we fold, where are these guys going to go?
Perhaps the ultimate instability story came when the Denver Spurs lost their team in mid-flight.
We were leaving on a road trip, and our assistant coach says, I don't think we're coming back. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, I was in the office this morning, and here we're on a plane flying out of Denver, and he said they were moving the furniture up. I says, you got to be kidding. He says, where are you going? Where are we going? He says, well, the rumors were going to go to Ottawa. So we ended up in Cincinnati. We're lining up at the blue line, Cincinnati on their blue line, the Denver Spurs on the other blue line, and all of a sudden they played O Canada. And here we are in Denver Spur uniforms looking down the blue line at each other, and everybody's holding back from laughing. And that was the first indication that we were going to Ottawa.
The newly minted Ottawa Civics lasted just 2 weeks before folding. When we return, a look at how the WHA gave hockey an international flavor.
Hi, I'm Bobby Hull, and you'll hear more about the WHA after this break.
Hope, compassion.
Just about every Canadian, let alone every Canadian hockey fan, has seen this goal. It's from the 1972 Summit Series, where Paul Henderson scored that goal that beat the Russians. Well, 2 years later, Henderson was again playing the Russians, but this time it was with a WHA All-Star team. The team was a mixture of the old and the new. Some players had faced high-level international competition before. Others were now thrust into the world spotlight with the expectations for this team to win against the Soviets. For Bobby Hull, the tournament was a chance to face the Russians after being denied that opportunity in 1972 because he had dared defect to the WHA.
Likely the biggest high I ever had was at Quebec City when we started the game. When I was standing out there when they were playing both national anthems, I was so high that they dropped the puck, it went back in our end, and I wheeled and came out and down the right side. Andre Lacroix, I was playing with Johnny McKenzie, and Lacroix threw me a perfect pass. I could not put my stick down on the ice to take that pass. That's how high I was.
It was one of the stepping stones in my career. Being able to play in a team where, I mean, you have Gordie Howe, and I'd known so many of these players like Bobby Hull when I was a kid, and I used to be a stick boy in the visiting locker room, and Frank Mahovlich and Jerry Cheevers, and you can go on, and J.C. Trombley, just so many great hockey players.
But despite the talent on the ice, this squad didn't fare as well. The WHA version won just 1 game, lost 4, and tied 3. Despite the record, the Soviets were quite impressed by the senior Howe.
But the Russians were saying, how can someone be effective at that age? And Gordie went over there, and he was just unbelievable. I thought he was the best player by far on the ice, and Bobby Hull had a great series, and it was a eye-opening experience. And you know, I can remember when we ended up losing the series, how terribly everybody felt. They thought that they let Canada down, but I really don't think they did. The team gave it their best.
The WHA Stars also played exhibition games against Sweden, Czechoslovakia, and Finland.
I was very proud of the fact that I had an opportunity to go and play against the best at that time, to learn from the Russians, learn from the Czechs, learn from the Swedes, but be part of a WHA team that, again, was very competitive. I think we took from that a great deal, and we were wise enough to start implementing some of their ideas to make the game of hockey better.
Perhaps one lesson learned by the experience was that there were plenty of players outside of North America that could truly play the game. At least one team took the lesson to heart. That summer, the Winnipeg Jets would add a pair of line mates for the speedy Bobby Hull. They were Swedes Anders Hedberg and Ulf Nilsson. The trio went on to become one of the fastest, most exciting, and most prolific lines in hockey.
The first day we went out to practice, we were practicing with the university team over at St. James Civic Center, and we were just out on the ice, and I hadn't known these kids at all. We were fooling around with the puck in our own end, and the coach of the university team said, "Bobby, you and Anders and Ulfie go," and I said, and I hollered, "Ulfie, Anders, let's go," and they came out of that corner like a bolt of lightning, and it was bing, bang, bing, bang, bing, bang in the net, and it was like that all the while we practiced with the university team.
They did stuff back in 1975 that the NHL teams discovered in the last 2 or 3 years. I don't mean the trap system or the defensive mode, but whenever there was creative, exciting offensive hockey, it was based on players interchanging positions.
All of a sudden you were going from this linear hockey to where players were all over the place, circling, coming back and recycling or transitioning back into the play. So it was really, everybody was totally excited about it.
The signings of Hedberg and Nilsson were arguably the most significant moves to turn the Jets into a truly world-class team, but they weren't the only ones. The Jets inked more Swedes, including Lars-Erik Sjöberg, who later became their captain. Finns Heksi Rioranta and Veli-Pekka Katola rounded out the now internationally flavored squad. Other teams followed suit. The Toronto Toros signed a couple of Czechoslovakians. The New England Whalers added twin Swedes, defenseman Tommy and goaltender Christer Abrahamsson. The Phoenix Roadrunners once listed 4 Finns on their roster. Other European players would soon follow, helping the World Hockey Association live up to its name. The WHA even included games against visiting overseas teams in their standings in later years.
We were the first in the WHA to play European teams, and for points. So we played the Finnish national teams, we played the Czech national teams, and they went from city to city, and the games meant something because they were for points. So it really was the influx of why international hockey is so big now in the National League, because all those good European players were already noticed when they come over to play the WHA.
Today the game has kind of blended the Canadian flavor with the playmaking of the European flavor, and I think we've got a better game today than we did back then.
When we return, how the Winnipeg Jets became the class of the WHA. Plus, we go toe-to-toe with the tough guys.
Hi, my name is Frank Seldom Beaten. We'll have more on the WHA when we return.
Crazy. It wasn't just the players from across the pond that gave the WHA its character. In fact, one of the more unusual characters was goalie Gilles Gratton, who began his WHA career in Ottawa.
He's best known for skating in the nude during a practice, for whatever reason only he knows. He's mentioned that he's had previous lives. He basically fit the goalie persona to a T. He had to be a little bit out there to play the game, and for a few seasons he was actually the goalie for the franchise, the Nationals, who became the Toros.
The WHA also became known for its tough guys. Gilles Bad News Bilodeau and Frank Seldom Beaten fought their way into the limelight. Gord Gallant put the fighting in the Minnesota Fighting Saints. And remember the movie Slapshot with the now famous Hanson brothers? Did you know those guys actually played in the WHA, and that only one of them was actually named Hanson? For these men, toughness was their meal ticket.
It started off, it was Frank Never Beaten, and then it got to Seldom, and then it got to Often, and then I quit.
Frank Beaten was a member of the Birmingham Bullies, another nickname given to the tough guys on the Birmingham Bulls squad. Beaten says he accepted his role on the team.
I wasn't going to score 50 goals, and I wasn't probably going to score 15 goals. But, you know, if you're good at something, if you're good at scoring goals, score goals. If you're good at playing defense, play defense. If you're good at perhaps being an enforcer, be an enforcer. You don't want to do any of those, don't play. You know, go home, do something else. And I chose to do that, and I did it for a long time, and I have no regrets.
Time has made Gord Gallant see things a little bit differently.
Well, yeah, you have a lot of regrets because, you know, the things you've done and people you had to fight and people you beat up, you know, you're never proud of those things. But when you're young and you just want to play hockey and they're paying you money to play hockey and you're living a good lifestyle, you do what you're told.
As for the WHA slapshot connection, the three Hansen brothers were actually Jeff Carlson, his brother Steve Carlson, and Dave Hansen, all three of whom played in the WHA at one time. A third Carlson brother, Jack, was supposed to play in the movie, but had other hockey-related commitments. Peter Young recalls seeing the brothers play in the minors.
And I remember all three Carlson brothers being on one line in Marquette, Michigan, with the glasses, with the tape, not all around it like in the movie, but with the tape on the bridge of the nose, because they were always fighting, and they were getting their glasses smacked into their heads, so they taped the bridge of their nose. So, you know, the movie was reality. That's the way it was in the old United States Hockey League, and they never won a fight ever. And that's where the whole movie came from.
In what could have been a slapshot moment, Gordie Howe once came to the aid of son Marty, who was being pummeled by an Edmonton Oiler player.
He said, let him up. And when the guy turned around, he got like about a half a word out before those fingers were up his nose, and he just had him lifted off of the ice, and the guy, all he was doing is waving his arms like this, going, I'm up, I'm up.
As a fighter in the WHA, you couldn't pick your spots. Gord Gallant found that out when he knocked Bobby Hull's line mates out of a game.
Last shift in the period, the puck's up there in, I go in to pick it up. Just as I'm picking it up, coming out of the corner, the horn goes in the period, and I get cross-checked in the back. I look over, it's Bobby Hull, and he dropped his gloves and stick. What do? That's Bobby Hull. I didn't even think. I just turned and grabbed him by the shoulders, threw him down, threw 4 or 5 punches. Apparently I had him by the hair. Piece.
The WHA began its 4th season with 14 teams. It lost 2 of them when the Minnesota Fighting Saints and the Denver Ottawa franchises folded. It was short-lived, but for 2 weeks the WHA actually featured 6 Canadian-based teams, and they had a Canadian division for 2 seasons. WHA teams in Edmonton, Winnipeg, Calgary, Toronto, Quebec, and for a very short period of time, Ottawa. It was a sign of things to come in the NHL. One of those Canadian teams would try to model itself after some highly successful fellow countrymen. The Winnipeg Jets had decided to follow the route the Montreal Canadiens had chosen. Skill over size, finesse over fighting. Now, with 2 more slick skating Swedes in tow, the Jets would claim their first of 3 Avco trophies, the WHA equivalent of the Stanley Cup.
I honestly believe that had the Winnipeg Jets gone into the National Hockey League intact, meaning the great line, I mean, which was, to me was the greatest line of all. The 2 Swedes and Bobby, I mean, they're just unbelievable. Had they let that team go in, they had good goaltending. Joe Daly was as good as anybody. And I think that that team would have been as dominant as Edmonton was in the 7 years after they joined the NHL.
And a lot of people don't know this. We challenged the Montreal Canadiens to a series, winner take all, and of course they had everything to lose and nothing to gain, and we never heard from the challenge because the Stanley Cup is a challenge cup, but we never heard from them, and we didn't force the issue. And it wasn't that we thought that we could beat them. We just wanted to show the whole hockey world how the game could be played.
After the break, we'll take a look at the other big league hockey team from Quebec, and we'll witness the beginning of the end for the WHA.
Hi, I'm Tom Webster, former member of the Hartford Whalers. This is WHA. Stay tuned for more WHA.
If hometown pride can be used as a motivator, what about carrying the torch for your home province? Add to that having to compete for the hearts of fans against the glorious Montreal Canadiens. Sound like an impossible task? Well, the Quebec Nordiques were up for that challenge. They fielded a team of mostly francophones who played with a wonderful combination of skill and pride. Among them were former Habs J.C. Tremblay and Marc Tardif. Jacques Plante and even Maurice the Rocket Richard both coached the Nords, albeit briefly. But there were also emerging stars from La Belle Province. Among them were a WHA original, goalie Richard Brodeur, whose only losing record in the new league came in his first season. And then there was scoring whiz Real Buddy Kluche. Kluche lit up the WHA, scoring 283 regular season goals in just 5 seasons. That's an average of about 57 goals a year. Later, when the Nordiques entered the NHL, they faced the Canadians in many hard-fought battles for provincial bragging rights. The 1977-78 season saw the WHA shrink. Colorful clubs like the San Diego Mariners, Phoenix Roadrunners, Calgary Cowboys, and the temporarily revived Minnesota Fighting Saints had dropped out before the season began. Players from those clubs either joined the 8 remaining teams, jumped to the NHL, or faded into the minor leagues. The remaining teams were competitive, and now more than ever, signing young players away from the rival NHL became a priority. The Birmingham Bulls tested the waters by signing 18-year-old Ken Linsman. His eligibility was tested in the courts. Linsman and the Bulls won. That move touched off a slew of underage signings and ultimately caused the NHL to drop its draft age from 20 to 19 and then 18. Emerging young former NHL draft choices Cam Connor and Morris Lukowich had already started to blossom in the WHA.
In '74, I was Montreal's #1 draft choice. And, you know, the WHA was something, like Phoenix came along and they said, well, we don't have any scouts or anything, so we'll just buy whoever Montreal's #1 draft choice is. And so that happened to be me, and so Phoenix offered me, well, I was told I was the highest paid junior coming out of Canada in '74, and so it was boiled down to money, so anyways, I ended up going to Phoenix.
For Morris Lukowich, it boiled down to a chance to play with boyhood idol Gordie Howe.
And I just loved Gordie when I was a kid. And I had just said at that time, sometimes you're just going to say, well, what the heck? And I did. And decided, well, I'll go there. Maybe there might be a better opportunity to play. But also, I just wanted to play with who I thought was a legend. I mean, he is a legend. He was, you know, at that time, he was the greatest player.
The WHA featured a lot of end-to-end hockey, which made breaking in as a goalie challenging.
The WHA was an open league. There was a lot of offense. There was a lot of shots. And I just felt that it gave me my chance to perhaps show some people out there that I could play. And you know, if you look at the time I was drafted with Chicago, he had Tony Esposito, Michel Dumas, and Mike Weiser. So that's 3 pretty good guys, and they were pretty young at that time. So it didn't look like much chance breaking in there.
In reality, many younger players began to join the rival league because they didn't feel they were ready to crack the National Hockey League. The WHA was viewed by many as the weak sister to the NHL. Some of the negative comments about the league began to take their toll on the players.
A lot of the kids that came out of junior or even some of the players that have played back when I first started in the National League, they made a lot of comments like that the players in the WHA, you know, couldn't play in the National League, and a lot of derogatory comments, I guess, and that kind of hurt.
Despite clever attempts to market the game, the WHA still suffered from an inferiority complex. But head-to-head preseason games against the NHL helped the cause. Overall, the WHA came away with a winning record against the senior circuit.
We knew we had a great product, and we knew we had the fans in the cities, but we couldn't get the national media attention either in Canada or in the U.S. And all of a sudden, those exhibition games opened a lot of people's eyes.
When we come back, the World Hockey Association enters its final season. It was a time to welcome some bright young future Hall of Famers and prepare to dismantle the WHA.
That last season, we had Mike Gartner, Wayne Gretzky, Mark Messier, Michel Goulet, Ricky Vai, all sorts of great young players who at the time, aside from Gretzky probably, people may not have heard of and may not have realized how good these guys were, but now we're seeing we've got bona fide Hall of Famers here.
Hey, Bob.
The WHA lurched into its final season in the fall of 1978 with just 7 teams remaining, having bid farewell to the 2-time Avco Cup champion Houston Aeros. Most of the notable Aeros players were snapped up to strengthen the Winnipeg Jets. The WHA had tried before to merge with the NHL, but now it looked like the league might just fold. Talks aimed at a merger collapsed over the summer, but the gloom soon gave way to the promise of a new season. And what better way to celebrate than with a few new arrivals? The WHA continued to confound the NHL by signing underage players. Nowhere was this more evident than in Birmingham, where the Bulls inked a six-pack of young players with bright futures. The so-called baby Bulls were goalie Pat Riggin, defensemen Craig Hartsburg, Gaston Gingras, and Rob Ramage, plus forwards Rick Vive and Michel Goulet. The Cincinnati Stingers got Mike Gardner. Dave Hunter became another Montreal draft choice to spurn the Canadians when he signed with Edmonton.
I think the number one thing is you really look at playing. There's, you know, you have an opportunity to have a chance to play, and I think that's why really, and at that time, and you know, now compared to what it is now, the money was a little bit better, but it wasn't considerable better, you know, than what Montreal was offering. But the biggest thing is the opportunity to play and the chance. I think they had pretty good vibes at that time. They were going to move on to the NHL.
Meanwhile, the Indianapolis Racers got into the action by signing a couple of forwards. One was Mark Messier, the other a kid from Brantford named Wayne Gretzky.
Nelson Skalbany at the time called a little news conference and brought in Mr. Wayne Gretzky, and he was going to introduce him to all us old players from the WHA. And here comes this young skinny little guy, about 165 pounds, that you look at him and say, well, yeah, okay, you know, like he's going to be our savior. And yeah, soaking wet, he wasn't as, you know, I lost more weight than that. But he turns out to be the greatest player in the history of the game.
It wasn't long before Gretzky befriended young goalie Eddie Mio.
He was only 17, leaving home, playing pro. That's a big jump. So we would go in and check on him. We'd play some basketball with him, but we'd even go by. He used to hang around at a Steak and Shake, it used to be called, and that's where all the high school kids hung around. So on a Friday night, they'd be all sitting out there. We'd cruise by in our car and just said, "Everything okay, Gritz?" And he'd say, "Okay." And so it was just a little bond that we got together.
The bond grew when Mio, Gretzky, and Peter Driscoll were sold to the Edmonton Oilers in November of 1978.
He walked in the room, skinny little kid, but boy, when he got out on the ice, you could just see that he had 5 or 6 steps ahead of everybody. He knew he could read the ice so well. The average player might have 2 or 3 steps ahead, that he knows where the puck's going to be in certain plays and stuff like that. Well, Wayne was 5 or 6 steps ahead. And you'll find that most of the superstars, like the Bobby Orrs, the Bobby Hulls, and the Gordie Howes, they have that knowledge. That's why they're so good, not because they're better skaters or better stick handlers or better shooters. They have better knowledge up in their head about how to play the game.
Wayne had a special talent. I often thought that he had eyes in the back of his head. He saw the ice better than any other athlete that I'd ever seen. And he was amazing. He could feather a pass where you would think that there's no way he could know where a teammate was, but he always found that teammate that was open, and it always resulted in a goal.
But you know what? He was humble, and I think, you know, we've seen all the things with it. You know, you guys and everybody, every fan in North America and the worldwide now has seen the talent he had. We've seen it in practice, the things he would do, but off the ice, the character. He's got a great character. He was raised by great parents. He is a kind and giving person.
The remaining 7 WHA teams became 6 when the Indianapolis Racers folded early into the final season. In March of 1979, the NHL and WHA signed an agreement that would pay the Cincinnati Stingers and Birmingham Bulls to go out of business. 4 teams would be welcomed into the NHL. They were the Edmonton Oilers, the New England Whalers, who changed their name to the Hartford Whalers, the Quebec Nordiques, and the Winnipeg Jets. For the record, the Jets won the last Avco trophy that spring, defeating Gretzky's Oilers in 6 games. With that, the World Hockey Association was dead. The 4 incoming teams lost several players to teams who reclaimed their one-time draft choices. The former WHA teams began their NHL lives as mere shadows of their former selves. None of the newcomers did well that first season.
It was heartbreaking to see that team dismantled because Barry Long went to Detroit, Greg Higgs went to Detroit, Kim Claxton went to Pittsburgh, Richie Preston and Terry Ruskowski went to Chicago Blackhawks. It was pretty depressing, and believe me, I've been around hockey long enough. If we could have played a Stanley Cup team after our Avco Cup final, we would have given the Montreal Canadiens, who I believe won the Stanley Cup the year, all they could handle.
After the break, we'll look back on the lasting impact the World Hockey Association has had on hockey. It's been more than 20 years since the WHA folded, but the league gave hockey fans 7 seasons of colorful and exciting hockey. 7 seasons that saw growth and ultimately decline. But those years were not wasted time. Several young players went on to star in the National Hockey League.
Gretzky, Messier, Kent Nilsson, Morris Lukowicz, Michel Goulet, you name them. And that was a lasting impression because they were all great young players. Mike Gardner's, you know, they were pretty good, solid players who eventually, a few of them are going to end up in the Hall of Fame in the National Hockey League.
When the merger, or as the NHL calls it, expansion, took place, almost 150 players with WHA experience played during the 1979-80 season. Wayne Gretzky has wrapped up an amazing, record-shattering career. Now Mark Messier stands alone as the only current former WHA player still playing in the NHL. Some former players like Craig Hartsburg and Robbie Ftorek are currently NHL coaches. Others like Rick Dudley and Glenn Sather are general managers.
You and I could have been great coaches if somebody handed us Wayne Gretzky, but that didn't stop Slats from then becoming a great coach, you know, and then a great administrator, a great general manager, you know, one of the most astute hockey executives in the world. But he had his beginnings as a player in the WHA and then a coach in the WHA.
As for the teams, the Edmonton Oilers went on to win the Stanley Cup 5 times with the likes of Gretzky and Messier. The Quebec Nordiques moved to Colorado and won a cup there as the Avalanche. The Winnipeg Jets moved south to become the Phoenix Coyotes. The Hartford Whalers are now the Carolina Hurricanes. The WHA preceded the NHL into several Canadian and U.S. cities.
There weren't that many teams down in the States when that WHA started, you know, and all of a sudden you get a team in Houston, you get a team in Phoenix, you get a team in San Diego, you get a team in Birmingham, Alabama, and where are the teams now in the NHL? You know, a lot of them are now down in the South, and I think that the WHA had a lot to do with that.
The WHA is far from forgotten. It lives on in memorabilia and books. This one is written by a man who lives in Arizona and grew up watching the WHA. Scott Sargent started collecting information on the league, but his hobby grew into an obsession.
I don't know what prompted me to go that extra mile to create the book, but when I started doing it, I just found so much good information. I thought there's just something here, and it became an entity.
The turnout at a WHA reunion 20 years after the league folded showed the league still has its fans. It also gave those who were a part of the WHA a chance to share their memories and think about what the league meant for hockey as we know it today.
I think the fact that we broke the reserve clause, I think the fact that we were able and had the foresight to go after the European players, and I give Benny Haskins credit for that. It was Ben who decided that we should go get the European players. And then, of course, over time, you know, we had so many ties in the National Hockey League for years and years, and I think the overtime helped break that up a little bit.
Hockey was dictated by the owners, and when the players showed that they could produce on their own and produce a quality game, it gave a little bit more leverage to the players to this day that I think is very, very important to the structure of the game.
I guess the biggest thing was not just the money. It showed that hockey could expand. It showed that there certainly were a lot of people out there that loved the game and were willing to pay the prices of the tickets and to help support the game.
Thank God for the WHA. I think if people really analyze it, it not only set the tone for higher increase in salaries, not that they were exorbitant, but they did raised the level, the standard. It also got the draft to 18 years old.
I still believe to this day that when you see Theoren Fleury signing for $8 million a season, and Keith Kachuk and Teemu Selanne and Paul Kariya, and the list goes on and on and on, every one of those guys should be sending thank you letters to Bobby Hull. Because if it were not for Bobby Hull, none of those guys would be making $8 million a year.
Without the WHA, you know, Edmonton wouldn't have played in the NHL. Calgary would never had an NHL team. Quebec Nordiques would never had an NHL team. So, I mean, it created a real opportunity for Canadian cities to actually see their heroes play, in which they never would have otherwise.
I guess one lasting tribute is how the men who put the league together feel about it today.
I wish I was 20 years younger. I'd take on the National Hockey League right now, going and getting the Europeans and forming a real strong league, and we'd give the NHL all they could handle. But the problem is that I'm not 20 years younger. Maybe some other guy might do it.
John Diefenbaker said something to me once I never forgot. When we pass through this world, we've got a good life if we've got good memories. I've got great memories.
Ah, yes, the great memories. I'll tell you why the World Hockey Association means so much to me. Growing up just 2 hours outside of Winnipeg, I was a fan of the league virtually since it began. I can remember going to the Winnipeg Arena to watch the Jets play for my 15th birthday. Just about all the players were kind enough to give me autographs that night. The experience left its mark on me, just like the WHA left its indelible mark on hockey. I'm Corey McCrindle. Thanks for watching.